There's been a whole lot of discussion online about traditional marriages and relationships versus this quote unquote modern women and modern relationships. And I mean, really, like, my response to that is that we have to get with the times. We just have to get with the times. And I don't think it's very realistic for men and women to think that we could just go backwards. I've been reading a book about the history of marriage, and I think what's like so fascinating about like how it started, in pre-industrial age when everybody lived on farms. Pre-industrialism, if something happened, if you died during childbirth, which happened a lot back then, it was just basically like, let's bury my wife and I got to go tomorrow and find another one because we got to,
Wow.
because winter is coming. And then people started moving into the cities and started becoming very populated. And then that changed marriage. And of course, the war with Rosie the Riveter starting to work. So, we see some of these things, right? And in these changing of economics, basically, the way economics have changed, that also changed the way marriage is looking. And then we go forward into the 50s, and everybody got married because of love. They would fall in love with somebody and get married, and it happened instantaneous. It's like, like nowadays, I'm like, whoa, hold on. Don't you just marry the first man you fall in love with, right? They lived in the suburbs and they worked in the cities, and it was a very long commute, and a lot of women stayed home during the 50s, right? And what they were saying was that during those times, the women would just be lonely. They would meet their husbands, they would fall in love with them, but it never sustained. Those marriages were very difficult to sustain because they're living two different realities. Their husbands are in the city working these jobs. The women are in the suburbs taking care of kids, and they didn't even understand each other. He would come home from work and talk to his wife about things, and she was clueless about what he's talking about. She didn't even understand what was going on. So, and he didn't understand her world and the things that she was involved with. So a lot of those marriages were very unhappy, right? And so anyway, so the book goes into this, actually it was in the 80s, it was when divorce rates spiked. Do you know, Chris, why in the 80s divorce rates spiked? Tell me why.
No, I have no idea. Is it because we saw an increase more so in than other decades? We saw it in the 80s that women started to work.
No, let me tell you, in the 80s, California had a governor, and what was that governor's name? Ronald Reagan. Yep. Ronald Reagan is the reason why divorce rates spiked in the 80s, because California was the very first state that said you can have a divorce based on irreconcilable differences. It wasn't until Reagan came and said, okay, you know what? How about you just have unreconcilable differences? Everybody saves face. And that trend started in California. And then, of course, every other state took over that trend. And that's why divorce rates went up in the 80s. And then the 90s was the Oprah Winfrey era. Remember Oprah Winfrey in the 90s?
I sure had that. Absolutely.
Who? Eckhart Tolle. She's a hero, right?
Yep.
So Eckhart Tolle came on board, and they were talking about self-actualization. It was just like, I want to be who I am, and I want to discover myself and have this self-actualization. And so that's what, that had a lot to do with the reason why marriages took a shift. And I think right now, as we speak, marriages are now shifting, and I can see it based on historical information, but I can also see it based on what I see in my office a lot of times, is where now we're seeing, as we talked about before, women are making about as much money as their husbands now. Okay.
Yes.
And they are sick and tired of they watch their mothers carry the load. And a lot of men have also watched their mothers carry the load. And a lot of men are rising up and saying, you know what? It needs to be a little better. We need to rethink this. And smart couples are able to sit down and say, you know what? We're going to share the financial responsibility. We're going to share the raising of the kids. And we're going to share our goals and values have to be aligned. And we are going to be together and stick together. And that is why, number one, marriage rates have been decreasing. But the people who are getting married are staying married longer. It's just like, we need to get away from this traditionalism, whatever that is. We are never going back to that. And I think a lot of men and women need to get on board with this, because guess what the data is now telling us? And I'm a scientist to the heart. You can say what you want and come up with your little, and I love wisdom, practice wisdom and all of that kind of stuff. I love that. I'm not going to put that down, but I also love data. And data is telling us now, data is also telling us right now that marriages are happier. People are happier, live most fulfilling life right now. Right now is the best time to be married, because marriages are getting better. They are happy. People are more content, more satisfied in their marriage right now than they've ever been in the whole history of marriage as an institution. And I think that's beautiful.